Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 204.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on professional club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time. Many thanks to Dr. Tyler Standifird, a biomechanics expert at Utah Valley University and researcher in how to create more swing speed, for reaching out to me a little over a month ago. It was great to do this interview with him about some of the things he's learned for how to create more driver swing speed, something I think most of us, if not all of us, want to do to help us shoot lower scores. Enjoy this valuable and an interesting interview with Dr. Tyler Standifird.
Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf, changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 204 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And I appreciate Tyler Standifird, a biomechanics expert and professor at Utah Valley University, for reaching out to me to do this interview. He is, as he emailed, doing a lot of cool research in how to create speed. He has a website titled Simply Faster. He actually received his PhD in kinesiology from the University of Tennessee. And his research is often geared towards sport and exercise movements to decrease risk of energy and also to improve performance. And we won't talk any about why you love socks. We could do that some other time. But I thought that was kind of neat. But probably from a research standpoint, but who knows?
Oh, a lot of gifts from students who are trying to get good grades happen to be nice decorative dress socks.
Ah, okay.
There you go. There you go.
Well, let's jump in and talk a little bit about your personal story. What led you to a career in the field of biomechanics and research into helping athletes become, as you say, simply faster?
Yeah, so my initial goals were some things related to medicine, medical school, dental school, which is kind of where I started my degrees. And once I spent time shadowing those careers, I realized I wasn't excited about doing that for the rest of my life. And luckily, I was in a biomechanics class my senior year of college when a professor basically said, "Hey, if I had any interest in golf, I could really do some things in the world of golf." And I had been working at a golf course on the grounds crew for the previous 10 years at that point. And so golf was something that I played a lot growing up. I had been around the sport a lot, but just didn't think I could maybe make a career out of it. And then this kind of opened my eyes, and I went down the road of a master's and PhD so that hopefully one day I could do golf biomechanics.
Wow, that's neat. Now, the 10 years, was it at Centennial?
No, so I
know
did
you
my
worked at Centennial somewhere. I do.
So I did my PhD at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and so my interaction at Centennial Golf Club, I didn't get to play a lot of golf as a PhD student. You could,
right.
figure out why. And I also had my first and second babies during that time, so not a lot of time to play. And so I have 3 brothers who all play golf, and my dad, and we have a family trophy we pass around. And they came out to Tennessee just one time to visit. I had played golf maybe once that year. And so they thought, this is going to be the time we're going to beat you up, Tyler. And because I'd beaten them for a lot of years, and they didn't like that because I was the youngest brother. So they come out, we play at Centennial, right where you're at. And I ended up shooting a 69 that day, which still to this day is my best round. And my brothers, they were so disheartened and discouraged. They thought, we're never going to beat you if we can't beat you during your PhD. And I said, probably not. So I've got very fond memories of Centennial.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, so from a golf speed development standpoint, what are besides talking about things people can do, what are the major things in your research kind of toolbox and the things you use typically when you're doing research in this area?
Yeah, and I actually love that you look at it as an idea of a toolbox, because I feel like over the course of my educational years, I was just trying to equip myself with tools that I could utilize myself. And honestly, when it comes to speed development, there's some things that I've used for years and years that are, these high-end biomechanical stuff. So I'm fortunate to be at a university where I have advanced motion capture systems and force plate technology and golf simulators. And so that's where a lot of my tools started as part of my master's and PhD. And so I've utilized a lot of those same skill sets to analyze swings at that level. But then at the very basic level, I think some of the stuff that I get the most excited about are like a simple radar, or I did a study with on-course performance with shot scope. And I think the tools of things that the everyday golfer can use, and then try and maybe correlate the more advanced stuff with the everyday golfer. I think that's kind of a cool thing for golfers who are trying to create speed. So I love those simple devices too.
Yeah, yeah, and just give you a little bit of insights and have instead of sometimes the tough stuff, the big shot stuff, you have to really dig deep to understand what it's giving you too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's nice is like, the golfers who come into my lab, sure, they think it's cool to see a 3D avatar of them swinging, and they like to see the force trajectories going. But the first question they always ask me is, how much faster am I swinging it? They're not asking me the timing of their peak vertical force in the downswing, right? So I think that the speed and the on-course performance is really what we're trying to do, help golfers gain that speed and transfer it to the course.
Yeah. Now, there are a lot of small and important pieces to what I call the puzzle of creating club head speed, and I keep working on it myself, especially for the driver. Talk a bit about why training with club weights that are heavier and lighter and at the same weight of a standard driver have been things that are helping people create more club head speed. I mean, there's a lot of different ways people are approaching that and doing it. But they all seem to work in some way, shape, or fashion, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point where I think golfers realizing that training for speed is a good idea. For so many of them, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit where if they just start doing some things where they're moving things faster and maybe do a little bit of training in the gym that they've never done before, there's a lot to be gained with that. And I think you mentioned the idea of maybe these training clubs with variable inertial weights and things of that nature. I think a big part of it is that golfers tend to get really, I guess, gun shy about speed when they're dealing with a club face and a ball.
Yeah.
And so I think a big part of some of these implements that golfers can use to train for speed comes from the idea of, when I get rid of an impact and when I get rid of a club face, I can actually train my body to move faster. I don't have to worry so much about delivering everything perfectly through the impact zone. And I think what happens is, if you compare some of this, weighted club training with some good driver balls. I'm not saying golfers shouldn't do that as well, but I think if all you're doing is hitting a driver and a ball, I think you're going to lose out on these benefits of getting over that hump and breaking through those barriers and knowing, hey, I actually can swing this a little bit faster. And I think we find that over and over again with people who start to train this way.
Yeah, yeah. So they may not swing quite as fast as they do with the weighted clubs, but they're picking up something that really matters.
Yeah, and they are, right? And I think that's one of those things where, the other thing I think about weighted clubs, like in my background being in exercise science, exercise physiology, I always think of things from like a gym and training standpoint too. And I think we don't do a lot of things training wise where we try and do everything with the exact same weights, with the exact same intensity. I think in other sports for lots of years, we've known there's been a benefit of loading weights in different ways and creating different intensities and velocities of movement but also having some caveats where you do want some specificity for transfer over to the sport you're going to do. And so I think these, overspeed training type systems can be wonderful tools for golfers to utilize.
Yeah. Now, you've published a few articles on research you did in some specific things golfers can do to create more clubhead speed, non-dominant side golf swings. And, I don't know if you listened to one of my podcasts, if that's some of the highlight stuff, or actually podcast 200, for older people, simply just turning more and swinging through, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk about some of that research and the implications for golfers.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of been a really fun thing for the past about 2 years. And again, like you said, there are lots of opportunities and systems to utilize for training for speed. The research that I did was with the company Super Speed Golf, where I did some things with them, right? And so a bit, again, systems that are working in similar fashions. And what I've really been able to do is look at some of these tools and just have people go through the training as they're trying to gain speed and start to look at what's happening to their movements and ways we can enhance it. And so, you mentioned one specific study, which was a study I did on, non-dominant speed training. And this is something that, if you're into the world of biomechanics and Twitter golf and speed training, this is going to pop up over and over again. And so it's something, Tony, that I wanted to at least start researching, but also that I wanted to start learning a lot more about as to why we're seeing these benefits, or why maybe there's a hypothesis that it would help. But in the study, I actually had kind of golfers, right-handed golfers, train from the non-dominant side, meaning they were making left-handed swings during their speed training. And saw some really cool things in terms of speed gains that were created. The big thing in golf for amateur golfers when it comes to their ability to generate speed is that they typically don't generate enough ground reaction force, and they don't generate it at the right timings, meaning they're either late or early. And for most golfers, it's late to the lead leg, meaning they're just not really shifting and transferring and putting a lot of force on that lead leg early enough in the downswing, and then they don't have the time to transfer it out to the club. And so what I'm looking at is how does speed training alter some of these parameters in terms of magnitudes and timings. And so in that study, I saw large increases in the magnitude, improvements in the timings, basically just showing, hey, golfers are utilizing the ground better as a result of speed training, in the terms of more force and at better times in the golf swing. I
think that's one of the interesting things to me about any speed training is it's if you really go after it, it kind of teaches you a little bit more about simply doing those things too, rather than, moving your weight and all those kind of things, right? The things that you really have to do to create more speed. I mean, I know for me, I almost learn something every week or two that seems to help me a little bit when I'm doing this.
Well, and I think you're exactly right, where I could, and when I have opportunities to present at PGA sections or things like that, and I'm talking to golf coaches, I think that we want to help golfers improve in some of these things. And I think, as you bring up, Tony, sometimes it's as simple as just saying, hey, you've got to kind of sort out and figure out how to make this club move faster. And when you do that, you do it in a way that creates better sequencing and better force production and those kind of things. And so I think that you're exactly right on, where it's like, just figure out how to make this move fast. Your body will kind of self-regulate, self-learn, and all of a sudden you're going to get better utilization of the ground and just better swing mechanics. And then I think a big part of it too, Tony, is that when we start looking at training effects, right? Meaning as we start looking at the importance of training the body in all different types of muscle contractions and in all different types of movements, we're doing that with speed training. We're getting these high velocity concentrics and high velocity eccentrics, and we're really trying to help that body become more efficient in the way that we're doing those movements.
Now, talk about some of the things that that people do to improve, but are there any specific myths that are prevalent? And so many articles, so many things talked about creating club head speed, and if so, what are these or some of them?
It's funny. I was thinking through this, so I think of the questions that I get asked a lot or that I see a lot, and I think one of the biggest things is that creating more speed is going to ruin mechanics. I see that a lot where it's like, you're gonna start throwing the arms too fast, and you're gonna start leading too much with this, or your club face control is going to go out the window, and I think I just don't see that in my research, and in the things that I'm looking at in my lab. I'm seeing that mechanics and sequencing are improving, like we kind of just talked about. I do think that another myth is like speed is going to transfer, and speed is really not a skill. So I think it's one of those things where golfers really need to understand that, like, hey, my speed went up 9 miles per hour on an air swing with a driver without hitting a ball. Well, that's great, right? That means you've got more speed in the tank, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be able to transfer that to the golf course immediately. It probably means that what you need to do is do some practice at these higher speeds and hit balls and be on the range and be out playing. And I think a frustrating thing for me, and I think for probably golfers too, is when they go out and maybe they don't see it as such, and it doesn't transfer immediately, and then they just give up and go back to their 92 mile an hour swing instead of their 102 mile an hour swing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like that person who's trying to fix swing plane that gets frustrated by their first 2-3 months of it and just goes back to their old crummy swing plane because they're not willing to put in the effort to make the change.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how much you work with the long driver type guys, but I guess maybe sometimes, there's speed improvements for the long drive guys, Kyle Berkshire, right? I mean, he's just in another world.
Yeah.
Tour golfers and everyday golfers. What are some of the similarities and dissimilarities? I mean, I'm sure there's some obvious dissimilarities, but similarities in what they're doing, all those sort of three groups.
Yeah. So I what's interesting is I would almost boil it down to intensities. And kind of this stress or dose intensity response type idea. And I think what happens is these long drive competitors, it's not that they're doing crazy different things than the everyday golfer, though some of them are, I will say that. But they're doing the same things, like magnified by 100. So I actually got to interact a little bit with Jason Zubak at a Titleist event recently, and it was really interesting because he was talking about how long it would take him to ramp up to his max speed, and I think he says like he would hit 80 balls before he would hit his max speed, and then he could hang on to that max speed, Tony, for like sometimes for like 300-400 balls. He's like hitting these just in sets where he's just that same speed over and over again. And obviously we wouldn't want our everyday golfers to do that. But what I think the difference then becomes is it's just about using that radar to find how long it takes you to get to the max speed and try and do as much training as you can at that speed zone so that you get those max benefits. And when you start to feel that fatigue and the speed drops, then you shut it down. And I think the difference is for a long drive competitor, that might be that they can hit, 1,000 balls a day. And for an average amateur golfer in their speed training, it might start with 20 balls 3 days a week. Or a couple of super speed sessions or over speed sessions, whatever the system is that you're using. Yeah. The other thing that I think is kind of cool if we compare the long drive to the tour and the everyday is there are some things that you saw in long drive that we thought, we'd never see a tour golfer do that. And I think now we're seeing that a little bit more when we see the guys on tour really try and get after it. And you see that lead leg lift off the ground a little bit in the backswing, the heel comes up, you see, that foot come off the ground in the downswing as they're generating a lot of speed. And so I think it's kind of cool now to see some of the long drive stuff be leaking over a little bit into the tour golfers, and their speeds jumping as a result.
You talked about Jason Zuback. Did you ever see the video? Maybe he did it when you saw him. I saw a video once of him on a huge, like a exercise ball,
Mm-hmm.
hitting full shots, driver shots. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it doesn't surprise me. That guy would do just about anything, I think, to try it to see if it gains speed, right?
Yeah, yeah. Amazing guy. People don't remember him as much.
Yeah, impressive athlete. But I think the key there is that you can do some of these same things. And I think what was cool about Jason, as I've been able to chat with him and get to know him, is like he just really experimented and then saw what happened with speeds. And that's one of those things that I always suggest to golfers, right? Is like, don't be afraid to play around a little bit. Don't be afraid to alter some things in your setup and to alter some things in what you're doing swing wise. And again, if you have an easy radar, that's a tool kit that any golfer can add, or tool that they can. And let that radar kind of guide what you're trying to do and figure out some things that your body wants to do to generate more speed.
Yeah. So, back a little bit to the average guy who wants to improve club speed. Are there any specific exercises that you most like them to do to get a little bit of bang to the buck? I mean, and there's so much going, there's so many things on Twitter about, lifting weights and throwing balls and all these kind of things. But anything's, just for the, the general person that you suggest they do?
Yeah, so I would say if you are lacking time, which I think many of our golfers probably are, because let's face it, we're already in a sport where maybe our partners are not so excited about us taking the amount of time we take on the sport, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I think if you have limited time, I know this is the cop-out answer for limited time. I'll start here and maybe go to some other ideas, but specificity is going to trump everything. Meaning the more specific you can make your training to what your goal is, the more bang for your buck you're going to get. And so that's why I think we see these, heavier and lighter clubs, the overspeed training seeing so much success, is because the specificity is there to speed training. Now, I'm in the camp, Tony, where I feel like most golfers are generating speed that's not equal to their strength level, meaning we can put some speed on pretty much any golfer, at least over the first 6-8 weeks. And then we maybe need to start getting creative about strength and speed and some things of that nature. But I think initially, get that specificity, swing some things fast, be it overspeed clubs, your driver, whatever it is, swing things fast. Have some time every week that you're swinging a golf club or speed implement fast. And then I think once you've got those gains, now I look at, okay, what can really a golfer do? And I think it's not the secret sauce. It's some consistency with some basic weight stuff. So, I mean, one of my favorites would be a couple of kettlebells of some various weights that you could have at your house. And all of a sudden we can do some kettlebell swings. We can do some grip strength stuff with kettlebells, some carries with the kettlebells, some presses, some pulls. I mean, there's a lot you can do with 2 or 3 kettlebells in 20, 30 minutes. Get a good hip hinging exercise, a good pull, a good push, get the rotation from swinging your clubs faster, and you've got a pretty good program.
Neat. That's I've never bought any. I've got a bunch of barbell type things, but and I don't use them enough. I should. And just a little bit, right? I mean, just a little bit of up can help people.
Yeah, I don't think that's what people understand, even from an overall exercise standpoint. I mean, this is true for cardiovascular exercise, strength training, speed training. Like, you need very little to cause some changes to take place. And so I think finding the 15, 20 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days a week to do some things, you'd be shocked at how many people would see huge results with just that kind of time commitment.
Well, in the background of all this, the thunder is booming, and I am so glad that we have gotten this far to this today, because who knows if it's going to knock the power up, but maybe let's end. I mean, if there's any other, as you called, cool data things that you haven't shared, talk for a few minutes, and anything new about some upcoming research that might be down the road that you're really excited about.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think one of the coolest ones that I at least mentioned as a tool I have, but not much on the study results, was an encore study that I did where I utilized a shot scope in a group of golfers and had them actually track their performance on the golf course in terms of driving distance and accuracy and scores, and then had them do speed training, and then had them return to those same golf courses, play the same amount of time, and things like that. And that was a really cool study because I think another one of those myths is that as if we get faster, we're going to get less accurate. And that was actually a study where golfers hit the ball further, and they were actually 10% more accurate. They hit 10% more fairways as a result of the swing. And I think that was kind of a cool one. But again, it's like we said, Tony, faster swingers of the golf club tend to do some things mechanically that are pretty solid in the swing. And so I think when you can hone in that skill, it tends to lead to some improvements all around. And so I think that was kind of a really cool one that I did. One of the things that I'm learning a lot about right now, Tony, that I've just been reading about really extensively is this idea of eccentric training. So just really quickly, what I'm talking about with eccentric training is that muscles can shorten and cause tension and force, but muscles, as they're lengthened, can also create tension and force. And so this is an example of when I stand up out of a chair, my leg muscles stand me up. And then when I try and sit down in a chair, those same leg muscles are going to be the things that, under a lengthening tension, are actually going to allow me to sit down in a nice way instead of just plopping down into the chair, right?
Yeah.
And as I've been reading a lot of research on this, and the golf swing, the idea is, well, we do right to left rotations if we're a right-handed golfer. And so that would be the idea of somehow we've got to train muscles that are doing right to left rotations, both concentrically and eccentrically. Well, the way we would train them eccentrically, think standing up, sitting down. Well, if I rotate right to left for concentric, then I can rotate left to right for eccentric. And when you dive into the eccentric training, there's just so much that's going on metabolically, neurologically. There's just some really cool principles there that I'm excited to dive into a little bit deeper. And maybe that kind of then brings up that last point, Tony, which is, where am I planning on going with my data collections? I just got a new markerless motion capture system in my lab.
Wow.
And so this is it's 8 high-speed cameras where they'll all pool together those images together, and then utilizing an advanced algorithm, I'll be able to build skeletal models of that golfer and start to look at full body mechanics. And so actually this next week, I'm having my very first subjects come in where I'm going to dive really deep into the kinematic changes of overspeed training with golfers, what's actually changing about their kinematic sequencing as a result of overspeed training. And then we have some cool technology in our lab here where we can actually tease out muscle mass in each individual leg and each individual arm and the trunk. And so I'm going to do measurements of that and start to really try and understand correlations between maybe even different body segments, muscle mass, and speeds being recorded. And so this is a project, I'm going to be doing this semester, which I'm really excited about.
Pretty neat. Who knows? Could be a future podcast interview.
Yeah. Hopefully, right? Hopefully we'll find some cool stuff. And I think this is the kind of stuff where we really want to understand how these golfers are altering their movements as a result of speed training, because I think it helps us enhance the way we train for speed. And so I've looked at some kinetic stuff on the ground, and now we'll get into the kinematic stuff, and it should be a fun semester.
Well, that's great. Well, I just want to, again, thank you for reaching out to me. And this was a great, fascinating interview. The Simply Faster website, which I'll put in the show notes, there's a lot of great stuff on there. Some of the blog posts and all the kind of things on there. If anybody's looking to dive deeper into some of that, and if there's any other links that you want me to send, Tyler, I will do that.
Yep.
But I look forward to getting this out there to people in a couple of weeks. And it was really interesting and fun to get to talk with you.
Yeah, and Tony, I want to just specify really quickly. So I've written a few things for Simply Faster, and I communicate with those guys a fair amount.
Oh, that's right.
I just want to make sure it was clear that I didn't start. I don't want to take credit for the great work those guys are doing in terms of starting it, but I love reading their stuff, and I've had the chance to write some things for them. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
They'll forgive me for.
I'm sure they will. If it pushes more to their, like you said, they have such great stuff on their site. I really enjoy reading the stuff that they have there.
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Many thanks, Tyler. It's great that you're getting to do some really interesting research on how to help golfers learn how to swing faster. I put links in the show notes to 2 of the YouTube videos that Tyler's done that can provide some valuable information for all of you listeners, and also to the Simply Faster website. As Tyler noted, he's been a contributor to that website, and there are a lot of interesting links there that might be of interest to you. My main shout-out today this week really has to be to my wife, Diane, who will be dealing with me while I'm recovering from my knee replacement surgery on January 30. Thanks, honey. And I also want to say thanks to some of my AGCP friends who provided me with some insights for how to help golfers who have Parkinson's disease to continue to play the game that they love. More on that in the future. Remember that there's a Support the Golf Improvement Podcast link in the show notes for this episode, and your support for a much-needed upgrade to my 2012 iMac podcasting computer would be greatly appreciated. Well, that's it for today. I've already recorded a new interview with Dr. Rob Gray, author of the best-selling How We Learn to Move, and author of a new book, Learning to Optimize Movement. He had some great things related to skill improvement that he shared with me, and this interview will be live on February 10. Until then, take care, God bless Ukraine, and God bless America.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com